name is Agata Krzysztofik. I'm the head of marketing at PictoChart, the all-in-one visual communication tool, and the organizer of the Business Storyteller Summit. And I'm excited to welcome our next presenter, Dmitry Dragilev. Dmitry will show us how to use your business story to get press coverage and links. So a topic that many of you are interested in. He's the founder of Just Reach Out IO, a platform which has helped 5,000 business owners pitch journalists and get coverage in press, all on their own without any help of PR firms. It was not so distant that Dmitry used PR and SEO to build a startup from 0 to 40 million page views, and the startup also got acquired by Google. He's a contributor at Forbes, Entrepreneur, Wired, Business Insider, The Next Web, Wired, and has written over 1,500 articles in the last decade, which is really impressive. Welcome, Dmitry.
Thanks for having me. And I used help to write all those articles. It wasn't just me.
But it's still very crazy, very, very impressive.
Yeah, there's a lot of articles. I outline them and then somebody writes it. And
yeah, maybe you could also share, how to do it, the perfect delegation mechanism.
It doesn't work for everybody, but it works sometimes when you outline and then somebody writes it and then you edit it.
That sounds interesting. I know that you also wanted to make this session very hands-on and example-based. So let's cut to the chase and maybe show us, and guide us through the process of identifying and developing a story. So first this, and then using this story to get press coverage and SEO links.
Yeah, sure. So I'm screen sharing. I don't know if you can see my screen. You can see my screen. All right. So all of you guys are viewing this right now probably have not been impressed or have not been impressed in the last week or two. Or maybe you have been impressed, but you want more press. You want to be in blogs and print media and newspapers and TV and radio, and you haven't been there yet. And to start from nothing, to go into getting in press from all sorts of publications is really hard. And so a lot of us are kind of thinking on it, well, what can we do? We can launch a product, right? We can go to something like Product Hunt and check out how people do it there, right? Because that's how people launch products on this platform called Product Hunt. But it's kind of a one type of event, like one-time event. You launch something, and you might be up here, and we have tons of people who do this, but it comes and goes. Or you can go and you can do Indiegogo or Kickstarter. Same idea. You kind of launch something, and that's the news event, and that's what you get coverage for. And that's not the type of PR that I really like to talk about, because it's kind of one-hit wonder. It might work, it might not, but at the end of the day, all the stuff just kind of disappears, the traffic disappears, and then you're back to pretty much square one. And so what I wanted to kind of show you is a technique that I tell everybody to use, and I think everybody should use. And it just gets results for anybody who has never been in press and who is not launching a product. And to be frank, you don't even need to finish your product to be able to use this technique. And I urge anybody who's listening to this to start this almost right away. And that's why I didn't want to have slides or anything like that. I just wanted to just really get in there and just show you one actionable thing right away, because I know all of us are busy and you might not watch this video till the very end. But there are queries from journalists. These journalists are asking specific things about a topic. And so for the purpose of the search, I just typed in travel into our tool just to see what people are asking about when it relates to travel, because we have a couple customers in the travel industry that recently signed up. Particularly, we have one that it's an app that allows you to get points by reviewing air travel. So whenever you take a flight afterwards, you can review that flight and then you get some points. And so for them, there's really no chance of getting more and more traffic. It's an app, they launched it, they got some press, but what can they do to keep getting press? And so this works for pretty much anything. So somebody like that would type in travel, and right away we start seeing a lot of different things people are asking about. This is the safest way to travel during a pandemic. So you open this up and you can see a very detailed sort of query from somebody at USA Today. Christopher Elliott, is air travel still the safest way to travel, or is car something else better? Now we can read through this and we can see more information about him, his email, and we know that this is expiring today. And so it's very timely to be answering these, but we're starting to gather a couple of things. One is we can go ahead and answer this. The other thing is, okay, air travel and safety. All right, if I'm a travel app and I just launched something, this might be something I should look into in terms of creating data around, perhaps, maybe something that I can track over time, because this is something that I can see that people need. What business travel will look like post-pandemic. And this is for like a dentistry website, best places to ski on the East Coast, travelers who have experienced anti-Asian racism since COVID. Don't visit the places during COVID-19 outbreak. So you can look and you can see that these are coming from different sources. This looks like the same person, Chris Elliott, but this is for Forbes now. So he must be writing for multiple publications. And see, you can see the emails are different as well, because this is coming from a different source called Help Reporter. So these come out on newsletters. And I'm doing a search and just reach out because we index all of them. But what you can do is you can subscribe to Help a Reporter, and this is Help a Reporter right here, helpareporter.net or helpareporter.com, I think is the URL. And that's a free newsletter that gets out. It's very hard to search. You get a lot of newsletters a day. You get maybe up to 7 or 8 of them, and each one has maybe 100 queries in there. But you can also search for free, right? These also come out on Twitter. There's hashtag journal request, and we index 21 of them. So, but the idea being is that you should just be answering these. And now, the other thing that I like to do is looking at expired ones. The expired ones are the best because nobody's fighting over them, and yet you get a glimpse into a person's interest. Let's look at this expired one from October 6th, Washington Post. Again, the same guy, Christopher Elliott. So now we have 3 things that this guy, Christopher Elliott, really wanted. But I'm researching a story of government's role in protecting air travelers so far this year. And so he goes on to kind of talk about what he really wants for this story. This is something he was interested in. If I go ahead and look up Washington Post, Christopher Elliott, and I don't see a story on government protecting air travelers, then I might say, all right, well, maybe I should answer this person about that, But if I do, then maybe I should pitch him something related to this, but a little bit different, expert tips for navigating travel quarantines and bans in the United States. And again, you can type in very specific things or generic things, and you can find multiple sort of ways people are asking things around this. And so in the expired section, what I like to do is looking at these expired queries, just trying to think like what topics are journalists asking about, what journalists have asked about, and trying to see an overarching umbrella of kind of what are the things that people look for that I can provide on a daily basis, seeking experts comment on dreaming, seeking comment on new Microsoft Surface laptop, business stories, technology and pandemic for BBC. So yeah, so you got like two options here with these older ones. You can go ahead and kind of look at Vicky and BBC and say, look at what she wants and then answer it. Or you can pitch her and say, all right, well, I don't have what you want, but I can also give you something else,
I have a question related to this, because obviously you mentioned it as well yourself, right? That when the query is not expired, there is a lot of people probably pitching them, right? So we come down to this topic of pitching, like how to stand out in the crowd. Like if there is a lot of individuals like trying to get their own story inside of this specific press coverage, like how can you make sure that you're going to be the one that triggers their interest and going to actually secure it?
So So yeah, that's a good question. What I typically do is I look at expired ones, because expired, nobody's pitching at all because it's expired. But what I like to do is I like to start conversations with the expired ones, and I will like to um, talk to them about something different from what they are asking about, or something that is complementary to what they're asking about. So like if we put in artificial or maybe like AI or something like that. So I'd like to look at something that they, how to use AI to provide a human touch for improved CX, CMS wire. This expired September 29th. And so if I can see that Scott Clark at CMS wire wanted to a specific thing around how to use artificial intelligence to provide human touch to improve CXs. So what I'll be pitching him is something relatively different, but related to this. So I might say, you wanted AI for human touch. I'm going to pitch you AI for fintech. And I'm going to say, Scott, saw your query from October 1st. I'm not sure if you got the answer there, but I have some data around, AI for, and then I would basically change something here, but still stay on general topic of AI that Scott was interested in. Now, Scott is no longer getting queries from everyone else because Scott's query has expired, unless he's posted other ones. So I can pretty much pinpoint an interest of Scott's, and I can basically start that conversation and steer it a tiny bit away from the direct interest. Now, I might miss, but still, I would start a conversation with Scott about something related and interesting to him. I use these questions to sort of picture myself in the room with that person talking, and then say, oh, you were interested in that human touch thing around AI. I have something else that's related to that. It's not quite what that is. What do you think of this? And so it's just a conversation starter. I like to start conversations with people and think about how I can intrigue them, because pitching cold directly, we can talk about that when you just don't have this. It's harder. I usually use data and insights, but for people that are listening to this, most of you might not even have data. You might not have insights. You might not even have a product that you launched, and you really need publicity, or you need to start conversations with journalists as early as possible. And this is the way to do it. All you got to do is just start conversations,
And how would you do it? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, go ahead.
But interested, how to incorporate the individual business stories in here, because I remember that in the past when we actually worked together when I was still at Groove, you told us to take the first step and basically think about our unique stories that could be interesting for journalists. So basically come up with 3 different angles that we could start pitching. So I'm wondering if this tactics still applies. What do you think is better? Is it better that you first think about your stories that could be interesting for journalists, or is it better to do a more general research within your business category and then think do I have a story that is actually interesting and relevant to this?
I think it's good to have 2 or 3 angles on what you want to kind of pitch. And I think with Groove, we said maybe that one of them would be the entrepreneurial story of building the brand from 0 to 5 million or 100 million, and really going through that journey and pitching yourself as a kind of a podcast guest. And then another one was around some kind of launch that you guys were doing. And then another one maybe of some data on sort of customer service data or something like that. And so those were just 3 different ways to interact with journalists. So whoever's listening to this, they might also think that way. There's the entrepreneur who's listening to this, who's building a company, right? There is that entrepreneur who's creating a product or a service offering. So that very service offering is another sort of story that you can maybe see if people are interested in. So the process of building it, the actual product itself that you built, and any data or insights that you have. So data and insights is very hard to kind of to just come up with. And so media pitch. So if you Google the word media pitch, like I did on Google, the very first result is my article. And so if you scroll down, I like this this pitch from Brian Dean. He's a customer of ours. He's a good friend of mine too. But I point this out a lot because we just talked kind of like entrepreneur, then we got the launch story, and then we have the data story. And the data story, this is an outreach that happens independent of answering people's questions. And this is something a little bit different, but you can do this kind of outreach without any data. You're essentially, you can ask journalists to see if they'd be interested in this. And then you can guess at what the findings would be. And this could be something related to what you do, potentially, because that you're gonna have to guess at what the findings would be of that data or not. But a lot of people get stuck on, oh, I can't really answer people's questions. That takes a lot of time and effort, right? I can't really launch anything right now or do a launch story because I don't have a product ready. I don't have a website ready. I don't have the founder story yet. I can't really do that, right? So maybe I should try and like run a quick data story, but then collecting the data takes forever. And collecting data does not, because you don't need to collect any of it. You can literally say, I'm running a survey, and then this is the preliminary findings, kind of like the polling results, that's very vague a lot of times. And so then you just literally, if you get bites on this, then you start running the data and saying, all right, I got 5 people are interested. Maybe we should go and create a report or a piece of data on it. So it's just different ways to think about doing PR. And for the purpose of this kind of presentation, I don't have slides because I didn't want people to just get kind of bored, but I wanted to show real examples and visuals of it so people can kind of understand, how all that stuff works.
I really like this example from Brian Dean from his pitch, and also the fact that the pitch is so short and like really up to the point. So if I would get a pitch like this, probably would respond as well. Do you have maybe some other examples from your clients, like how they were pitching and what were the different angles of attack as well when trying to get press coverage and links?
Yeah. So I think, a lot of people can't do this, but this is one of like my favorite ways to pitch a guest post. So again, people listening to this might not be able to answer questions or even create data or even think about launching a product, but this is a way to sort of pitch a guest post. So when you want to contribute somewhere. Now, this person has already been covered or not been covered, but has contributed to a number of publications. It's always important to sort of give a really good headline of what you want to pitch and kind of what it is inside that they're going to write about, and make sure that these 2 ideas, usually I give editors 2 ideas. I relate it to the general topic of the actual blog. So he's pitching Glassdoor. Glassdoor is a big company in the HR space. And so he's pitching specifically career advice category because he looked on the editorial calendar and that's something that they wanted for that month. And so he's got 2 sort of punchy headlines, right? A little bit different from each other, more personal. This is kind of more business kind of knowledge versus this is more kind of like personal advice. And then he gives some examples of where you've written. Now, most of you don't have, you're listening to this, you're like, oh, I don't have HubSpot or Moz or HBR. The thing is, you don't need to. I think you can even post your Medium link here and just show the example of your writing. And pitching yourself as a guest writer, it should be done. It should be a supplementary sort of effort to pitch yourself and get out there, So I like how simple almost, but more kind of specific it is as well. It's very similar to the pitch. So in podcasts, tool, we have a lot of pitch templates in the platform, but there is a pitch in here that I really like that people have been using. So it says, "Hi," and then you'll put like podcast host in here. And then you'd say, "I've listened to your show for a bit, really loved your Lost in America episode," something like that. And then I wanted to reach out and ask if you're taking guests. "I'd like to apply to be a guest on the show. Here's a bit about me and my accomplishments." And so here, again, you guys are listening to this. You might not have a lot of accomplishments, but you must have done something amazing, right? You must have built something, somebody has used it, or maybe something else you've accomplished in the past. I've been interviewed on a number of podcasts now. If you have, great. If you haven't, you can skip this part. And then I have some ideas of what I think we will focus on during the interview. And this is what this other person was kind of pointing out in the beginning. It's like he wants to write about these two topics. Here's what you're pointing out to that you want to be interviewed on a podcast about. And this is related to the actual episode, right? So if you listen to this episode, these topics maybe expand on that episode. Maybe you share something new, some new insights, something interesting that is different from that specific episode that you listened to on the podcast. So you're lost, and then you'd probably put like specific name of the actual episode. So you'd go and you'd actually listen to the actual episode and you put the specific name, and then what you're pitching here relates to that. Same here. He probably went to the career advice, saw that the specific article or two, saw that there is an editorial calendar, if there is one, asking for specific things, and then his pitches here relate to that specific blog post that he saw from someone else. So yeah, you just want to make sure that it's related to specific pieces of content on that podcast or on that blog that you saw. I'll show you a few more if you want.
I think also like if people want to see a bit more pitch examples, you also share it either on justreachout.io, right? And also on your blog, Criminally Prolific. I think they can check out some examples. I would be also interested in another aspect, because we spoke a bit about this, that, a lot of the audience might not have maybe perfect stories, maybe they didn't launch their company yet, but there's also on the other spectrum, there are the ones that already did launch, but they are a bit stuck, how to even approach the journalists. And some of them might really have interesting stories. Let's just take as an example that, I don't know, it's a bootstrap company, which is completely women-led or something, which is kind of makes it unique. And what if you actually do have a very unique business story that you think could be interesting, but you just do not know where to get started, how to find the journalists that could be potentially interested in this specific story that you have, and how could you even get it out to the world?
Well, I like to see what people are writing about, and again, if you don't have the tool, you can just do this in Google, for example. But female founder startup. Let's just do that. Startups and startup, maybe like that. And so my idea is that in the tool, what we try and find is things that people are writing about. And so you can see right away, Bay Area's female founder startup deal list, 39 founder startups that are doing big things, 10 female founder startups you should know. And so now I can see that there's a lot of lists, right? So I'm looking for specific stories. So founder startup story, something like that, where I'm trying to find people that are covering something unique or specific and around female-led startups. And so all of these people, by the way, qualify for a outreach of some type if you have a female founder of a company, because they have covered something related to what you have, but I'm sure they haven't covered exactly what you have. And so I usually just add them to a specific list and do outreach to really see there needs to be a relevance gap. We need to just be finding a specific gap between what this person has written and what you have to say, right? And so as I look through what they wrote, I try and find, well, John wrote this female founder taps non-relay startup resource women. All right. So it's like a generic angle on, okay, this is what is happening with her, right? And this is a little interview that he did. Is there something else that you can sort of add to the conversation that gives it more relevance and gives it more uniqueness that warrants another article from a person, this type of person, right? Doc AI links deal with health insurer Anthem, names female co-founder CEO. So this is a coverage of a specific startup that I guess has done something amazing so far, and they just named the female co-founder CEO, which is interesting because it's written by a staff writer, it's somewhat short, and it's a little highlight of the whoever just took over, and the fact that it's a female CEO. And so you can also say like gender biases or something like that in startups, and bring up these types of topics that are sort of related to a female-led startup CEO business. This is where I like to do a brainstorm, essentially. So when you start out, and by the way, I'll just link this. This is part of our academy, but what I'll do is I'll link the actual lesson to you so that you have it. But in this onboarding, we have you do this exercise that is called sort of brainstorm. And when we brainstorm an idea around sort of a conversation starter and an angle to pitch based on an actual article. So you saw, we just did this whole bunch of searches, and we found a whole bunch of articles around female-led startup, or this female is the CEO of a startup. So based on those articles, what I do is I type in the publication, I put the article that's related to that publication next to it. And then this is where the brainstorm starts. I usually give you about 5 to 10 minutes. And then what you're going to do is part of when you sign up with our platform, or independent of it, if you're just listening to this is a good thing to do almost right away, is go through the conversation starter and start. How would you start a conversation with that person? What would you say? And so in this case, this is a travel startup. And so they're pitching sort of best honeymoon destinations blogs. And so the relevance gap here is they listed all these honeymoon destinations, and they forgot under the radar wine tasting tours. And so because that's the relevance gap, that's the conversation starter, right? So in your case, you need to be reading articles and always looking for that relevance gap of kind of, they mentioned all this stuff, but they forgot this one point that I know a lot about, and I'm the expert and I need to tell them about. And so that's what this person is doing with me here. And then in terms of the angle and pitch, foodie honeymoons, 10 under the radar honeymoon wine tasting tours, something like that, which it's related to what these people have written, but it's this relevance thing that they forgot. They forgot this one little thing. And so what I want people to get into a habit of is, you can answer all these queries every once in a while and get featured. You can pitch yourself to be a guest on the podcast or a guest contributor. But if you want to continue, start relationships with journalists, and you want to proactively do outreach, you need to get this part really fine-tuned and just do this exercise over and over, so that you identify that relevance gap inside that article that you just read. Write down how you're going to start that conversation. Like, okay, I've identified something missing. Here's what I'm going to point out, but I'm not going to just, yell it at their face. I'm just going to kind of start a genuine conversation with them about. And then I'm going to have some type of an angle idea in terms of like, what's the actual headline going to be that's going to be the next article for that journalist. So if they wrote under the radar honeymoons in Italy, their next article will be under the radar wine tasting in Italy or something like that. And so that's what I want everybody who even has a story to just get very comfortable with. It's like, and this just takes a little practice. You do not need to hire a PR firm. You literally just read articles, find what's missing, and then try and add that into the next article and think of the next article that they'll write about.
And would you implement this as a business as usual? So basically like do it on a regular basis, or more like as a project? How companies, startups can integrate this process into...
I would do this. So I would always time box myself, and I tell every customer time box themselves into, say, hour or two a day. So when you get started, it's like this psychological thing. All of us listen to this advice. We'll listen to these videos and lessons. It all sounds good. Then we go back to what we used to, because what we're used to is that, hey, whatever I have been doing before, it kind of gives back something. It's not new to me, right? So I do something and it gives back. It might give back traffic or fame or money or just keep my lights on, right? So that is priority. And this kind of new stuff that you kind of learn here and there is just kind of on the second, third, fourth, fifth priority. It might sound interesting. You might jot it down into your notebook, but you don't do it. And so what happens is the minute you start getting something back, you get excited. You're like, oh, wow, I can't believe that, this is coming back to me. And then you invest more and more time into it. So that's why I say time box yourself diligently into an hour or two a day. Just put that effort in, because without effort, you're not going to get any results. And just start somewhere. So I would start here or start answering those queries that I was sharing you before. And then eventually you're going to get some type of results. And I'll point out, this is a person from Help Squad, right? Natalia, she's never been in press before. And so we spoke with her, and she got these 4 articles in a matter of 3 weeks. Now, she was very hesitant to start, because when she wasn't doing anything, she wasn't like, when you put that effort in 1 hour a day, that's a lot of time. You're not getting anything back. Psychologically, you're like, I got to do something else or something new. It's just not giving back right away. And so I urge everybody, as you incorporate any of these things that you're listening to, give yourself an hour or two a day for a month. And then you should start seeing results like this, where you get 4 articles, and and this is amazing for her. This is not everybody does this, but she was very specific on kind of what she was pitching, and she answered queries on press opportunities, the very first thing, the questions, and she was really good at it. So I would do an hour or two a day.
So she kind of did it as an experiment for a month, like where you can kind of like, it's not that much effort, right? Like you give yourself, let's say, for a month just to see like what type of results you could get, and then you're like a bit more motivated to continue doing it. But I'm glad you mentioned also an example here, because I wanted to ask you about it as well. I feel that on top of like putting this 1 hour a day, I feel that people always get motivated by some sort of numbers and success stories. So I was wondering if maybe you could share with us an example of a customer, like one of your customers, who had most success with these tactics, that let's say they got a lot of press coverage, or where they got way better results than they did when they were using a PR company.
Yeah, sure. I mean, most of our customers that come to us have used PR firms. They just are not that happy with the results, because what happens as a PR business, the way a PR business is built, you take in a lot of clients, you pitch their stuff, their news, and then you need to continuously get paid more and more, and you need to work with them on new news, right? Now, as a business, say I had like 20, 30 employees working for me, right? Each of these employees needs to talk to all the customers and think about new stories. They're not part of your business. They're not part of your vision. They're just an outsider who's trying to look and peek inside and maybe come up with a headline or something interesting to say. And they're doing this for money, and they're doing this on behalf of, say, 50 different companies. And so the effort or the insight or the relevance gap identification, like we were just looking at, is not sophisticated enough for them to continuously bring you new stories. And that's why it just falls down. I found this out back in 2007. I just was fed up with PR firms, so I started doing this myself. But yeah, I'll show you a couple. So I think PieDrive is a great example because when they started out, they had this big goal of ranking for a specific keyword, and it was sales management. And we had like Wikipedia ahead of them. They had all these bigger sites like salesmanagement.org. And the reason they wanted to be at the top, they didn't really want press like just for the sake of it, because nobody really wants to randomly just get press, because you want continuous traffic to your site to get more and more article customers, right? And so whenever you're doing PR, I want you to think about long-term approach, like what is going to be the result of it. And so 90% of our customers now are doing press not for the sake of, hey, I was in Forbes today, because nobody cares about that in 2 weeks, right? Because you're not getting any traffic from it. And those logos on your page is not something people care about these days that much. What you do care about is, hey, I'm ranking on Google. And so to rank, you need to sort of create a piece of content, and you need it to be amazing and epic. And you also need to reference it everywhere where you talk. You're on a podcast, you mention that piece of content. You're on an interview, you mention piece of content. You're guest blogging, you mention that piece of content. All your sort of mentions, references, links always have to point to that one piece of content, not even your homepage. And so they worked on this for probably 6 months, and they wrote like a whole documented study with me on Moz on kind of the step-by-step. But in terms of getting features, what they did is they inserted data points inside this article and examples. And there's a whole kind of video where Brad breaks down what they did. But they got these guest posts and mentions through building these relationships. So they would say, hey, you've mentioned sales management techniques, but you haven't mentioned sales manager salaries in your article. I'd like to talk about sales manager salaries, or something specific like that, where there was, again, a relevance gap. And so I can link this page up, and you can kind of check out all the mentions that they received. And also this case study sort of breaks down sort of how they did PR. It might be a little sophisticated for somebody who's starting out listening to this. They're like, Dimitri, this is like insane. Like, I can't even start to process and digest everything that you have to do in terms of doing PR and also ranking on Google with your topic on your blog. It's just way too much, right? But it's something to think about and kind of think in terms of like future. You know, if you're going to be doing PR and you're going to want customers out of this thing, it's no use to just getting featured on TechCrunch. Like, that's going to die down in a week, and it might be like a boost and your investors might be happy. But in terms of actual customers coming in, you kind of want to start ranking for stuff. So anyway, so that's just one example. I can share like others as well. I really like people who come up with studies and data. So these guys, Tabs Analytics, they come up with these. They're a research firm, so they have a lot of research that they do, but they come up with studies around brands, and it really helps them to sort of make sure that they get featured in different publications. So they have no shortage of data that they come up around shopping and consumer behavior. So like people that I see in the press constantly, and this is another customer of ours, they come up with just ideas and that are constantly in the press. Like when these guys started out, they were just a website to find a car, right? And so when we started talking, we're like, well, you have all these people contacting other people to buy cars. Can you come up with reports? And so they started coming up with reports of best cars, to buy and when, and how to buy a used car, 5 most overlooked, whatever. And so they come up with ideas and they pitch them, just like Brian Dean's pitch earlier today, just to see if this will fly. And if it'll fly, they'll go and they'll invest some time and effort. You can hire firms to actually do this for you, or you can do this yourself. But you can come up with these studies, and then you can actually pitch them. But the first step is always sort of to really think about what it is that people might be interested in. Read the questions journalists are asking, look at the articles they're writing, and find that relevance gap, like I showed you in that exercise where we saw the article and then we saw what that person was pitching in terms of wine tours and not honeymoon tours. And find some data that you can like pitch journalists, because journalists love data and insights, and then see if they'd be interested in. Don't actually create the data, and then once you do get interest, then start looking into it more and more. And but that's how a lot of these, like I See Cars Now is in the press pretty much every few weeks, like you saw, and it's like a little engine. They have somebody who comes up with ideas that they would pitch press around car buying, and then somebody else would go and do a bunch of outreach. Somebody else would get results from outreach, say, look, there's some interest, let's go create it. They create it, they pitch it back, and then they get published. It's a mini engine. I mean, they have maybe 3 or 4 people working on this, and they built up this blog, and they come up things that don't make sense, and they don't get featured, right? But typically they'll just use some data and they'll use some relevance gap to kind of see how they can do this. And by the way, like, you guys don't need to have the data or the actual insights in your app or on your blog anywhere else. You can literally go out and have a firm run a study for you, or if that's too expensive, you can do your own polling. There's tons of platforms where you can find participants to participate in your surveys or something like that.
I think also the examples that you shared throughout this talk show that actually data is usually where it's the easiest as well to get press coverage. So I think it's really interesting, and I think something a good takeaway, right? Like from this talk, that think about different maybe story angles around data that could be interesting to journalists as well. Dimitri, we are actually running out of time, so I will have to wrap up. But thank you so much for a really example-based session, and for sharing all of these different ideas, how to get press coverage, how to pitch your story, and how to get links. And also that, to show the audience that it's all about making it sustainable, right? So it's not like just this one-off press coverage that you're going to get, but something that is going to continue bringing you traffic. I think that's what we all care about the most. And I think for the audience, if they would want to learn more, you also have a blog where you share a lot of your content and ideas, right? Like, could you tell us more about it?
Yeah. So criminallyprolific.com is my personal blog. It actually has become more popular than the app itself, because I started this earlier than the app. But if you go to criminallyprolific.com/blog, I write about PR, and I give you all sorts of insights, like how to build media list examples, and how to create these different strategies that we talked about. These are usually behemoths of articles. They're like mini books. I only publish one every 2 months or so, or 3 months. Look at the last one was actually July. So I'm kind of overdue now, but I'll probably publish one more this year. I'll come out with like 5 of them a year or so. But they usually all rank for their keywords, and I'll do one epic one, but I'll only do it once every 4
Maybe next
months or
step will
so.
be a book where you consolidate it all in a book. I don't
I
know.
hope, yeah, maybe I should work on that. Somebody mentioned that to me the other day.
You see, it's meant to be. Thanks so much, Dimitri, for your time and for sharing all the ideas. We really appreciate it.
No worries. Glad to be here.
Goodbye.
Bye.